There are 5 things I learned after going through the dark night of the soul twice. Number 3 and number 5 changes my life because it changed the way I perceive myself from ego to spirit. If you are struggling with the dark night of the soul and you feel kind of lost, trapped, and stuck, stay all the way to number 5 because it's important. Hi, I'm Yong Kang. I have been through 2 dark nights of the soul and I help people to calm their mind and awaken their spirit. The first thing that I learned from my dark night of the soul is it's important to trust your vibe and your intuition. The reason why I got into the dark night of the soul is because I was lost in my career. When I was in my 30s, I switched my job from an accountant to an animator. But after working as an animator for 6 months, I realized that it's not a job that I want to do. So I came back to Singapore and I was working in my ex-company on a contract basis. At that time, someone from the animation industry saw my blog post and contacted me. He approached me to offer a job in his company, in his animation company. So I met up with him and I talked with him for a couple of hours, for a couple of visits. He was brainstorming all this job that I can do and help him in his company. But something about his vibe feels very strange to me. He gave me the same vibe as my mom, codependency vibe. Although he was helping other people, helping other animators to have a job, he was actually sacrificing his own life to help these animators. And as I was listening to him talk, I was wondering how does he has all these resources to help the animators. So at that time, it's already a red flag for me, but I didn't listen to my intuition. I didn't trust my vibe. After my contract ends with my ex-company, I went to Bali for an entrepreneur program. So when I returned, I was so eager to help this animation founder, but I realized there was no job for me. Later, I realized that he was in debt, huge debt, and he doesn't have the money to hire someone new. And I felt kind of betrayed because all this time we're having this conversation of what I can do for his company, but then he said that he doesn't have the money to hire me. So after this event and after my spiritual awakening, I became more in tune with my intuition. I realized that intuition has always been there for me, but I don't always follow or trust my intuition. Now I trust my vibe more. Even if you have good intention, but if the vibe that you give me doesn't resonate with me, I'm not going to go forward with what you share. The second thing that I learned is to embrace all your emotions fully. The reason why I get into that job offer so hastily is because I was avoiding shame. When I was in my ex-company, I tell everybody that I'm going to become an animator. I even wrote a book to tell everyone to follow their passion. And in the book, I share my story of how I become an animator. I shared this in my previous video. But basically, when I came back to my ex-company, I felt shameful that I didn't do what I preached. So when the contract ended 6 months and there is a new opportunity that came to me, I quickly take the opportunity. But avoiding shame causes me to make the wrong decision. If I recognize my shame and process it, I wouldn't have to make such a rash decision, which eventually lead me to a panic attack and later to a dark night of the soul. Also during the dark night of the soul, I was feeling angry and betrayed by this animation founder. But I didn't allow myself to feel the anger. I know as an empath, he wasn't intentional in hurting me. He may have overpromised me things that he wouldn't be able to fulfill, but his intention is still good. So at that time, I didn't allow myself to feel my anger. But when I didn't allow myself to feel the anger, all this anger is being pushed down, all your emotions are being suppressed, and that causes me to feel depressed. Now I understand that hurt is hurt. It doesn't matter whether the person has good intention or not. If someone hurt you, you have to be true to your own emotions. So after the Dark Night of the Soul, I have been very respectful of my emotion. When I'm doing my inner child work and reparenting my inner child, whatever emotion that I feel, I wouldn't judge. Instead, I will embrace and acknowledge anything that my inner child feels. So even if it's like throwing a tantrum, I'll find a quiet space and allow my inner child to throw the tantrum and be angry and be resentful. And what I realized that once you process and embrace this emotion actually moves out of your body very fast. It doesn't stay too long. So the third thing that I learned from my Dark Night of the Soul is to love myself unconditionally. Previously, my love for myself is conditional, but I wasn't aware of it. I didn't know that my love for myself is based on my career. Once the career is gone, and so is my self-esteem. When I was young, I have very low self-esteem. So I find all this self-development and all these self-help books, and it did shift my self-esteem. My self-esteem has improved and my confidence has grew. But what I didn't realize is this self-esteem is based on what I do. I feel confident because I'm doing my job well. I only love myself because I find value in my work. When I have a career crisis, that is where I became unworthy again. After spiritual awakening and after the Dark Night of the Soul, low self-esteem, this concept, this terminology doesn't apply to me anymore. I no longer feel unworthy about myself because I no longer attach my self-esteem to a certain area of my life, like my work, my finances, my relationship, or how many friends I have. It doesn't matter what I do. It doesn't matter what relationship I'm in. My value, my love for myself is not attached to all these things. And when your sense of self is no longer deeply identified with something, that is where you can love yourself unconditionally. The fourth thing that I learned from my Dark Night of the Soul is that things always end up working well. Things always turn out beautifully in the end. So during my first Dark Night of the Soul, I was looking for a new job. But whenever I looked for a new job, I started to have this panic attack. I was worried about the future. I don't know whether I will be able to find a job fast enough to cover my expenses. I also lost confidence because previously I thought animation is something that I wanted to do, but then I realized it's not. So how can I know that this new job that I'm going into will be something that will last me for a long time? But now I know that instead of judging a situation as good or bad, try and see the gift in each situation. You might not see the full picture right now, but it doesn't mean that there isn't one. After my spiritual awakening, I realized that depression is the best thing that could happen to me. First, it helped me to be spiritually awakened. I live a complete different life right now versus what I lived in like 10 years ago. I felt a complete shift in my identity. Without tasting the darkness, I wouldn't know what the light feels like. It's this contrast that makes me live a more fulfilling life right now. And the more I progress, the more I see that things are actually connected with one another. So all these skills I learned from the past as a kid or a teenage or in my jobs, they are actually not wasted. So for example, these YouTube thumbnails that you see, I actually as a teenage was playing with Adobe because I was like doing these banners for Survivor Castaway and American Idol. I was just having a lot of fun learning about Adobe. I didn't know that now I could use it for my thumbnails. And learning animation actually teaches me how to make the composition of the different elements looks more clearer and more appealing to the audience. And for video editing, I actually studied an elective where we are supposed to direct a film and do the editing. So I picked up the video editing skill, bare minimum, when I was a student in the university. And for teaching, like right now I'm sharing with you my content. As a kid, I like to play this game called School. So I'll lay out all my toys and I'll pretend they are my student and I start teaching them. And even right now when I have to read contracts from foreign publisher, I realize that these contracts are very similar to those that I have read in my previous company, in my ex-company, which is a media industry. We deal with royalties and the definition and terminology used are very similar. So I was so amazed and fascinated by all the skills that I picked up from Yong. It all applies to what I'm doing right now. If you feel very stuck and feel very lost, know that all the things that you have accumulated is not a waste. You will know what they are for as you progress. So the fifth thing that I learned from my Dark Night of the Soul, which is the most important thing, is that I'm not my mind, I'm not my emotion, and I'm not my body. Going through the Dark Night of the Soul helped me to see the gap between my egoic self and my spiritual self. Previously, when I was having depression, I was so absorbed by my own thoughts and my own emotion. But when I was spiritually awakened, the contrast is so huge that it's very difficult to ignore. There is a miserable me which want to die. There is another me, my spiritual me, my higher self, that is calling me to my true purpose. So if this mental me is me, then what is this spiritual me? How come there is two of me? So let me explain with an analogy. So imagine you are watching a movie in the cinema and you are the audience and you saw in the show the character is suffering. The character that's suffering in the show is the body. The director who is directing the character is the mind. And you, the spiritual self, is the observer, the audience. When you're so fully immersed in the movie, you lose the sense of self. You feel what the actor is going through. You feel his or her emotion, but you didn't realize that you are actually the audience. If the director is directing a movie that you don't like to watch, if it is a movie about pain and suffering, you as the audience can stand up and walk out of the cinema. You don't have to stay there and watch the bad movie. So after the Dark Night of the Soul, I realized that I am the consciousness, I am the observer, I am unconditioned love, and I am creator. I can create what kind of life I desire. I choose the movie that I want to watch. It's not that my mind chose the movie for me to watch. Yes, I have a mind and I have a body, and I acknowledge the thoughts and I acknowledge the emotion and the sensation in my physical body. But ultimately, I am the audience who is observing all this sensation, emotion, and thoughts. My spirit decides the path first, and my mind follows the spirit. It's not the other way around, where my mind set the direction and I just go autopilot. If you are struggling with the Dark Night of the Soul and you don't know what to do next, watch this next video.